So this is a very overdue video, but I finally got time to do it. Today I was gonna talk about scarf joints, especially how to mill them on the CNC machine. A lot of people are having trouble visualizing how to go about milling scarf joint necks on a 3-axis machine. You don't need a 5-axis, you don't need any special jigs or fixtures. It's actually quite simple. The simplest way, the way that I do it is I split it into sections. So I prepare my neck blank, I'll then measure everything out, rough saw the scarf joint on a table saw, and then I'll take both the neck section and the headstock section separately over to the CNC. I'll mill them separately and then I glue them together, and then the steps after that are to fly cut the essentially the joint, and then you start locating your nut and going off of that for the truss rods or for your locating pins essentially. So this is the guitar that I was making. It's pretty much done now, but I've been taking quite a bit of footage throughout, especially the neck build, and I'm going to be placing that in this video. I don't know how well it's going to transition because I'm not a professional video editor, but it'll get the job done. So the CAD and the CAM for the headstock section is actually really simple. I started out with the headstock shape, and of course with that came my nut line. From that I drew a rectangle which was as wide plus a bit of excess, essentially to cover the entire blank, and as long as the scarf joint surfaced before it started digging into the spoil board. From there I'll show you now. Actually, delete that surface. I just click surface, planar curve, and it gave me that surface. From there I generated a parallel finishing of that surface, and then you can go ahead, and this was for the binding channel. So with the binding channel I bring it out so it cuts all the way through the scarf. You would then draw your tune holes, and then you do the final shaping of the headstock. I don't actually thickness my headstock blanks after they've been cut from the neck blank. I leave them at full thickness. The benefit to this is that I'll do my headstock profiling, and you won't have any waste material that like flies off. It comes off when you do the back carve. However, the downside, I guess, is that you end up with a scarf joint that's further down the neck than a normal guitar. I try to aim for about the 2nd fret where my scarf joint is, because I can put a nice piece of like opposing colour laminate in there, and it really shows off that scarf joint. Some people seem to have an issue with it, might swell in the future and stuff like that, but not that I've noticed anyway. So this is the headstock and the neck scarf joint straight off the table saw. This is what I mean by rough cut. My table saw jig is essentially just a big fence at a set angle that I made out of a bunch of MDF. I laminated it all together, cut it square, pinned it to a board because it can rotate from like a 10 to a 15-degree angle and stuff like that. But you can get quite creative with them, you don't need to be. But again, this is straight off the table saw, so this is kind of the step 1. Unfortunately I didn't take any more pictures from between rough cutting and them going on the CNC, but this is what it comes off as on the CNC. So you can see the scarf joint section has been milled. You can see my binding channels come all the way through, and you can't see it, but the actual headstock profile is quite deep into there. So this is just a quick picture of the final scarf joints. Both of them are milled on the CNC machine. The way I line it up on the CNC machine is I'll take the nut line and I'll take the center line. I'll quickly show you in CAD, that'll be easier. So let's say that this is my center line and my nut line is here. I will engrave this onto the table, and then I will align everything up to that, just like that. And then the neck is done the exact same way, it's just of course opposite. So this is kind of the main trick, I guess, of getting your, because you can see I've got veneers going down the neck, I need to make sure that they are perfectly aligned. So what I do, this is just regular masking tape, I apply it to both surfaces. So this is the back of the headstock you see here, and this is the front of the neck blank. I will then put super glue, like a little dab, not dab, I'll do a little line of super glue across all three pieces, press them together, and being really careful that the veneers match up. So I'll be looking at the back and the front section of the total blank, I guess, just to make sure that the veneers line up perfectly. So this is when the super glue sets. The best thing about masking tape and super glue is you get like no residue. I don't like double-sided tape. Everything I've tried has moved. It doesn't pull up very easily at all, but it can move sideways, whereas masking tape is very, very good for that sideways movement. It doesn't move at all, essentially. So this isn't glued together, this is just a masking tape and super glue trick. And as you can see, the veneers have lined up perfectly. They are also on the back. So this is kind of step one of the milling. What I do here, so again, this is just masking tape and super glue together, this isn't the final blank. I will drill 2 pinholes, one here and one of course on the other side, and those I use for aligning when I'm gluing the neck blank together. They make it so much easier. I'm not sliding around with the clamps and the glue and making sure all the veneers line up and stuff. I've got 2 pinholes that are pretty much dead on. They're a slip fit, and they're not like hard to get in because you need to get them back out. Word of warning: don't leave your pins in whilst the glue is setting. You'd be surprised how well wood glue sticks to metal. So these are the 2 pinholes that have just been drilled, essentially. Nothing more to really say there. Again, just make sure that your veneers are spot on before you go ahead and drill these 2 pins. So these are the 2 pins that I use. They are brass pins, 6mm in diameter. I got them, I don't want to say custom made, but they were made for me by Granger Guitars. I think that they had some old stock because they also run CNC mills and lathes and stuff. But yeah, so they just drew them up to size, beveled the edges, and they're brass essentially. So worst case, if I hit them on the CNC, they're not going to do a huge amount of damage. I can CNC brass. This is the maple laminate that I put between the 2 scarf joint surfaces. You can't see it now, but essentially it turns into an arrow shape once it's milled. You'll see that later because I will put the milling video in, but I think it looks really nice, so I just do that. That's an extra step, you don't need to do that. So this is the final glue up. I know that the clamps aren't the best ones to use, but as long as your scarf joints are really well done, then you won't have any issues no matter what clamps you use, really. One thing to mention, I do I do carefully sand the scarf joints after they've gone on the CNC, just to take any tool marks out. I get the joint as perfect as possible. So after the glue up, I'll take the blank, I'll again masking tape and super glue it onto the CNC machine, and then I'll come in with a fly cut, and it will cut probably 1mm off the entire neck blank, including the scarf joint. I leave my stock slightly oversized for that fly cut. I will then take the blank off the CNC machine, and then really carefully, now that everything's flat and everything, I can align the new nut line, because the fly cut will push that nut line back. I'll align that up with my marks on the table, and I'll align the center lines with the center lines on the table as well. And then from there, I go ahead and drill my locating pins, my truss rod, my nut slot. This is about 1mm deep. It's because I like my nuts to be on the I guess the angled headstock itself, so it needs a flat surface to do that. So this is a quick video of the locating pins for the glue up. You'll see there's a bunch of masking tape and everything. This from the masking tape and super glue trick. These are the pins for the glue up, not for the eventual locating pins to lock. So there isn't a particular place where I set the pins to be inside a Rhino. I just make sure that they don't collide with any other pins and they're within the limits of the stock. So here's a quick little video of the glue up taking place and the pins that are used to align the glue up. Again, don't glue the pins in. They really like to stick to the wood glue. So now that the blank is all glued up and everything, it goes onto the CNC. I don't bother about placement very much, as long as it's roughly on the center line. This process is the fly cut. I use a 25.4, I think, yeah, a 1-inch cutter essentially to do the fly cut. I would like something bigger, but as you can see, my tool park is only 1 inch. So if I got anything bigger, I'd have to eyeball the Z height and everything, and it's like, My tool paths for this were a bit wasteful. I ended up just drawing a rectangle that was much bigger than the blank itself, just to make sure. But of course you can do it more carefully than I did. Hopefully you can now see how flush the overall joint is. Again, I will then take the whole stock off of the CNC, going off the new nut line that has been pushed back. I will then position it onto the CNC for the rest of the operations. So here's the video on the next operation. Again, I've relocated the stock onto the CNC, making sure that the nut line matches up and the center line. The CNC will then go and drill the 4 locating pins, which I'll use to flip it onto its back to do the actual neck carve. This operation will also do the nut slot and the truss rod slot. Drilling, but for the actual slotting, I would go for either a straight flute or a down cut, especially in especially in woods like wenge, which tend to splinter. They will really splinter up. You can see this upcut cutter really ripping through that material. That's one great thing about the upcuts, is they do plow through material very fast, but they do have a slight issue with the actual surface finish, especially in woods. For these operations now, I use a straight flute cutter like you would for a regular router. I've now switched over to a 3mm cutter, I believe it might be a 2, but this one just does the little locating pins for the fretboard. The same holes are on the back of the fretboard. And as you can see, I'm now test fitting the fretboard just to make sure that they line up with the locating pins properly. Now for the most exciting part, you can see that I've flipped the entire blank onto its back using the new locating pins. This process is essentially the entire neck back. There will be a couple of pictures on your screen for like the ending credits, I guess. These are of the neck in its current state, which is, it hasn't received its finish yet, but all of the sanding's done. It's ready to go for finishing now. Thank you for watching, and of course, again, if there's anything that you want to know that I haven't covered yet, leave a message. Any video ideas, stuff like that, and I will get around to it eventually. Thank you.